If you're looking for a place to hang out, figure out where you can take the next step in your dairy farming business, then you're in the right spot. Welcome to the High Performance Herd podcast. Here we will inform you what you can do today to future-proof your business for tomorrow. A big thanks to our sponsors Fonterra, Idexx, Koru Diagnostics, TasHerd, Tasmanian Dairy Trust, Zoetis, NHIA, Datamars. I'm your host, Andrew Savage. Enjoy this episode of the High Performance Herd podcast wherever you may be listening. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, and jump on our Facebook group, the High Performance Herd Project. Today in the High Performance Herd studio, I have Daniel Abernethy. Daniel is the Genetics Manager for Zoetis Australia and New Zealand, a company at the forefront of genetic evaluation. For over 2 decades, Daniel has been involved in the genetic advancement of our dairy herds, including managing Australia's National Genetic Evaluation Unit, NHIA, and was the Vice President of ICAR, the International Committee for Animal Recording. He's been generous enough to come in today and share his wisdom. Welcome to the High Performance Herd podcast, Daniel, and would love you to tell us something about yourself that most people don't know.
No worries, Andrew. And look, thank you for the opportunity to talk on your podcast. I really appreciate it. Something people don't know. I actually have too many hobbies. I think, as my wife puts it. I really enjoy camping, caravanning, going surfing down the coast with my family down at Torquay. I do photography. I like baking bread, brewing beer, following the V8 supercars, and I'm a mad keen Collingwood supporter. So plus a whole heap of other stuff.
You might have just lost some listeners there. I'm more rugby than AFL, but I know there's fierce rivalry there. So you sound like a good all-round Aussie bloke by the sounds of it.
I'd like to have a big shed and a tool for every purpose.
That's the go. That sounds great. And you work for Zoetis, which is a big company. I had a bit of a look on Wikipedia, and whether it's right or wrong, it employs over 13,000 people. Pretty big outfit. Who is Zoetis, and what is it you do for dairy farmers?
Yeah, sure. So Zoetis is a world-leading animal health company. We used to be a division back in the day of Pfizer, but we have spun out, and we are now a standalone company. And we focus on animal performance. And the company kind of have 2 large groups. One's the livestock group, livestock animal health group, and the other one is the companion animal group. So horses, cats, and dogs, etc. on that side of the business. So within livestock, we cover all of the key livestock species, but certainly cattle is kind of a front and center species, and that's where we mainly play with genetics. So within the animal health area, genetics is one of the subunits. We have all of our vaccines and our other core range of animal health products that many producers would be aware of. And we also have the genetics division, which covers both beef and dairy. So on the dairy side of the genetics business, we have our clarified portfolio of products, which a number of your listeners would be aware of, the genomic testing service for dairy. And on the beef side, we have similar type products for Angus and Wagyu cattle, as well as some of the other species or breeds, right. I should say.
Yeah, it's a big beast, like you say, covering a lot of different fields. And today, we'd love to focus more on that sort of genetic evaluation product that you offer. I would love to give you us a bit of a rundown what this genomic evaluation and genetic evaluation is that you do, and a quick rundown on what it is and how does it actually work?
Sure. So whilst not going back too far in history, the genomics and the use of genomic technology to assess the merit of an animal is actually a very basic concept, to be honest. It's very complex in how the data is collated and analysed. But the concept is relatively straightforward, and that is we look at animals that are really high performers of a particular trait, protein kilos, for example, for cows. And we also look at animals that are very poor performers for that trait. And then we assess their DNA. We essentially say what's common with the high performing animals relative to the low performing animals. So we look across the DNA, think like a row of piano keys, and you say, the researchers found that all those animals that are high performers happen to have a particular sequence of DNA or particular markers within their DNA, and the poor performers have an opposite set. So what we can essentially do is look at an animal or genotype an animal at a young age and say, which set of markers do you have? Do you have the good set or do you have the poor set? And we can use that data to then estimate the ultimate genetic merit of the animal. And the value, of course, is being able to do that at a very young age.
It's great. Yeah, I really love the way you've explained that, because it can be quite a daunting thing when you start talking about genomics. It sounds quite futuristic. So you've put it in a way that's quite easy to understand, which is fantastic. There's I guess on farm, there are different ways DNA is collected. I've heard of people plucking tail hairs, there's ear tags that punch a tissue sample, that sort of thing. Is there one sort of method or bodily sample that is better than the other? What's actually happening out in the field there?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. Historically, tail hairs were the sample of choice, and it's actually not a very great term, because it's not actually the hair that is the sample. It's actually the follicle that resides at the base of the hair, of the strand of hair. So taking an accurate and good sample is important. So we started off using tail hairs, and this is not just in Zoetis. This is genomic technology across the board, for that matter, and that was the principal source of sample. But in recent years, and well, they're not too many recent anymore. It's been going for a number of years. There are very specific purpose-built devices, so to speak. The tissue sample unit, or TSU as it's referred to, is the purpose-built tissue device for taking a DNA sample. It's a small tube that is connected to a cutter, and essentially a pair of pliers, and you take an ear sample in the same fashion as you would apply an ear tag to an animal. It's a very simple process, and it provides a purpose-built, taken sample for DNA extraction and genomic testing.
It all sounds pretty straightforward, really. Are farmers doing this themselves, or does Zoetis sometimes have a contractor or someone who comes out and does this sample for farmers?
Yeah, sure. It depends a little bit on the producer. A lot of our clients who have been testing for some time now take the samples themselves, and they can take it during other animal health practices, whether it's vaccination or drenching or whatever it might happen to be. There's quite a few producers now that do it when they're disbudding of their calves, that kind of thing. If any producers would like assistance, and especially those just starting, we're more than happy to arrange for one of our staff members to come out, train your staff, assist in taking your samples, and walking you through the best process in order to achieve a timely collection of samples.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. It's quite a simple process once you know what it is. It's not as daunting as maybe what you think. So this sample goes off to the lab, and you're looking at the sequences with this probably quite expensive and fancy equipment, and generating reports, I guess. This information is getting back into the farmers' hands. How are these farmers, I guess, what does this report look like, and how are these farmers using it in a practical sense that you see?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so as you said, the process is we take the sample, we run it through our genotyping laboratory, and we come up with what's called a genotype. It's just a map. It's a definition of the sequence of markers within that sample. And we work with partners. In Australia, DataGene is our local genetic evaluation partner. And we work with them in order to produce the breeding values that are the output of the genomic evaluation. And those results are uploaded into Zoetis's online decision support tool called SearchPoint. So that's available 24/7 on the website. You create account login and you can actually look at all of your data within SearchPoint. The key to genomic testing is making decisions. So the SearchPoint tool has functionality built within it to assist in helping make decisions. And the best way to think about genomic testing is say, where and how do I want to drive improvement in the herd? Profit obviously is front and center, or it's at the top of the list, however you want to do it. But there could be other traits within the breakdown of an animal, whether it's fertility or survival or cell count or protein kilos, milk volume, mammary system, stature, feed efficiency, or slash feed saved. All of those kind of traits may be of interest to producers. So we do actually see a range of use cases from our clients. They can be anything from just tell me who mum and dad is. Parentage is a component of the test that you get. That may be an early choice decision, or maybe they have used a number of bulls and they didn't or don't have good records on who was joined to who. So that can be an early win. The other early win, of course, is the advantage of not spending time or needing the time to go and mother up calves in the paddock. So the other way producers are using the information is to create groups of cattle within their young cohorts. These may be groups that they want to actively breed from. They may be groups that they don't want to have in the breeding program. They may be groups that they may want to cull or join to beef, or have an alternate future for those particular animals rather than being active contributors to the herd. So a key takeout that I recommend with most producers is initially think about what your breeding objective is. And in Australia, the BPI, or the Economic Profit Driver Index, is a key one of those contributors. Then think of a couple of other traits that you really want to drive performance on within your herd, and use that to shape groups within your cohort, within your calving group. And then work with your Zoetis rep, or we also have very good online support to use SearchPoint to help assist creating groups and creating decisions, so that you go into the yard and you've got an action plan.
That's a really great tool. It sounds like it's really individual to the farmer as to what traits they're chasing and how they use that tool. But I guess one thing all farmers should be interested in is the inbreeding piece. And I know farmers have quite often been quite alarmed when you talk about parentage as to how many daughters of mothers they've actually mismothered. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah. So again, there's various sources of data that we've got access to look at inaccuracies in pedigree recording. Numbers in the order of 15% inaccurate pedigree is not uncommon, and that has been reported in various projects and industries globally, not just from an Australian context. It's a little bit harder to analyse that on our current cohort of producers, because a number of them don't actually submit size when they test. They are actually seeking to rely on the results of the genomic evaluation to assist. We always recommend sound data recording. So we always recommend producers keep a record of joining information or calving information, that kind of thing, because it provides the foundation for assessment. For example, if the evaluation comes back and says the sire of these animals are Bob, but you didn't indicate to me what was on your record beforehand, then we mightn't be able to assist the producer in correcting pedigree errors that may exist. But if the on-farm record is submitted with the sample, the sire submitted was Jim, and we've come back and said, no, it's Bob. It gives us a nice ability to create a report for updating your pedigree records with your on-farm systems.
Well, there's a lot of benefit in that. And I was actually going to sort of talk about the bull side because, in Australia, I know the dairy industry was very early adopters of genomics for the female side, whereas New Zealand potentially were more looking at bulls and breeding and did a lot of genomic testing on the bull side. And in recent times, it looks like there's been more cross-pollination where Australia are adopting bull looking at bulls, and New Zealand are now starting to look at their females as well. And what is the advantage of genotyping bulls? You've sort of talked about it with SearchPoint. Potentially, I'm thinking maybe you've got them in the database there somewhere and can help match. What are you seeing there as the advantage of genotyping the bull side of things?
Yeah, sure. So just a little bit about the history. At the start, when genomic evaluation was first entered into ADHIS as the evaluation unit, one of the key outputs of that was to improve the reliability of bulls that were entering the AI system. Progeny testing of bulls, and I'm sure many of your listeners were involved back over the journey of progeny test programs. It would take a significant period of time to actually collect the data to assess the genetic merit of a bull in the order of 7 years. So that was a very significant investment and time to actually assess. And then from that data, a small percentage of those progeny test size would then upgraded to become a proven bull and enter the AI system. So the early win for genomics across the board was to really hone in on the sire selection side for those AI sires and cut down a 7-year process to one that could be turned around in merely months, where you assess the genetic merit of an animal and make a decision on that bull very early. Are you of a high enough merit to enter a genetic AI program? Are you a graduate? And you can do that at a very young age. Obviously, you need to wait until that sire is at a semen producing age before it's an active animal within the industry. But you could cut down that selection pressure, or cut down that time, I should say, on finding those animals very, very quickly. And that in turn supports increasing the rate of genetic gain. You get to find out the winners a lot earlier and get to use them a lot earlier. So when we were doing that here in Australia, one of the compounding factors that enable us to do that is reliability of the ultimate genomic breeding value. And that reliability was driven off, and is still driven off, the value of the reference population. And a reference population is just a very large bucket of animals that have two key bits of information. They have a genotype, which within itself doesn't tell you anything. Then they have phenotypic information. And what the evaluation does is join the two together, the genotype of an animal and the phenotypic records of that animal, to come up with the equation, the thing that actually runs the whole genetic system, the genomic system. So when we identified even greater opportunity to drive reliability from the reference population, we started doing some big projects in Australia. And one of them was called the 10,000 Cows Project. We'd exhausted all the bulls. All of the bulls that had an influence in Australia essentially were genomically tested, or they didn't have a genotype or a DNA sample available to test. So we moved over to cows. And the first group of cows were very highly reliable, mature animals that they themselves had a lot of phenotypic data. So we could add those straight into the reference population. Yeah, so we've completed the task, so to speak, and producers have been testing their females for a number of years now. And some producers, and so certainly some stud producers, have continued to test bulls. So there are some advantages in testing bulls. The first is, if you do use bulls as cleanups at the end of your AI period, you can test those sires, and you can then assign the pedigree, the dad, the sire, to your offspring. So you know when you're looking at your results, these are from my AI joinings and these are from my natural joinings. It can be a very clear line. Of course, if you have purchased bulls from reputable studs as well, or from other leading breeders, there is a possibility that the genetic merit of those bulls is of reasonable quality. So you may make a decision then that, okay, maybe I do want to hang on to these offspring because of their genetic merit being reasonably strong. So it's certainly not the big end of town. Females and the testing of each calf drop of females is certainly where the bulk of the emphasis is, but you can certainly test bulls and utilize those for use within your own program if they fit your objective.
Another great insight, and I guess when thinking about the cost, or a lot of people saying, it's expensive. How do I justify genomic testing? If you start to bring all of these aspects in, the search point and the bull side and the potential for outcrossing, really, the more, it's probably like herd recording, the more you look at it and get value from that information, the more return on investment you're going to get.
Yeah, definitely, Andrew. And look, with genomic testing, you are actually assessing the genetic merit of the production unit on your farm. So you can think about a widget factory, and they're looking at all of the different factors that run the performance of this factory, and they're looking at staff and electricity and power and input costs and output revenue. You can imagine the fact that, but they haven't actually assessed the widget machine that actually is churning out the product. So if that machine isn't performing, then the whole profitability of the operation will be underperforming. So on a dairy farm, the cow is the production unit. It's the thing that turns the grass into the profit. So genomic technology enables you to actually take a metric of the cow herself. You understand your cropping rate or pasture seed rates or fertilizer rates or interest rates or energy levels in feed, raw output in the vat. All of these are factors on farm that you've got metrics on. I know this, I know this, I know this, I do that, I'll focus on this. But a key fundamental part is the production unit, it's the cow. And a genomic test enables you to put a metric on that animal, on the production unit, and what's driving profit on your farm. So I believe it's actually quite a cheap investment when you think about it in that context. And it's not just a decision that provides a return on one point in time, or it doesn't just provide an output based on one decision. You get a genomic evaluation for the life of that animal. It's updated every week. So you can go back to those results every joining season. You can look at them based on culling decisions at the end of particular seasons. You can look at them to say, you might be a 2 or 3 lactation animal, but does your genetic merit put you into a group that's eligible for sex semen, for example? A number of producers have said, right, I'll put sex semen into my heifers. And that's not an incorrect strategy per se, but you can do better than that, because not every heifer is a step up, an upgrade from animals that are already in your herd. So you may take that data and say, right, in the 2nd or 3rd lactation, you might look at that cow and say, you are still of a high enough genetic merit that you actually put yourself in the group eligible for a sex semen straw. And this particular heifer either doesn't make the grade and doesn't come into the herd, or she does, but she's got a different purpose in life, and she's going to be joined to a beef straw or to another particular line of breeding, not part of your core objectives. So there are many attributes that you or decisions within the life of an animal you can use the genomic test data. And when you look at the Dairy Australia information, which shows anywhere between $1,500 and higher for rearing an animal from the point of calving up until the milking shed, that's a very significant investment. And if you can make a decision early in an animal's life, you can actually make significant savings just by looking at the husbandry and rearing costs of an animal from that point of calving through to joining the milking herd.
Great insight. Really, you're getting a lifetime of value out of that one small investment. Hey, Daniel, you've been doing this for a while, like this animal improvement space and in the evaluation space, a couple of decades from me stalking you on LinkedIn there, which is really well. What advice would you have for our listeners in this space? I guess, farmers that are overwhelmed, what's my next decision? Genomics, genetics, collars, that type of thing, in your world that you've lived in for those couple of decades, I'd love to know what key takeaway you would have for our farmers today?
I think the key takeaway, and it's been my takeaway for a long period of time, and that is genetics works. There is literally hundreds, if not thousands, of peer-reviewed papers that show that there is a relationship between the genetic merit of an animal and its overall profitable performance. And in livestock production systems these days, that is a real benefit. It's a real leveraged opportunity that we can take to continue to drive profit, continue to focus on the things that actually return money into the business, especially in an environment where costs and the pressures on livestock production are increasing. It's a significant driver of fundamental performance, because it provides the foundation of the merit or the performance of a herd. In any given year, it may rain, it may not rain. The feed price might be high, you've got a lot of feed, and the feed price might be feed price are high, you don't have a lot of spare feed, or vice versa, you've got a lot of feed. All of those environmental things can change from year into year out, but the underlying genetic merit of the animal doesn't. So this is, to me, a foundation technology, and I'd highly encourage producers to look at their operation and understand what are the profit drivers within their herd, and understand how genetic merit and improved genetic merit can really make a difference within their farm, not just in terms of genetic gain, but in terms of rearing costs, in terms of addressing labour costs in mothering up and chasing pedigrees of animals, in terms of dealing with an excess of calves, and especially potentially how you manage bobby calves into the future. The potential to look at other markets, whether it's a beef contract market that you may want to be entering, in terms of what animals may be eligible for export cattle. There are a number of factors where you can look at genetics and leverage that above and beyond just driving genetic merit. So when you add all of those things together, again, I'm very passionate about this particular area, but if you add that together, this should be a key component of your annual business plan. You conduct your finances for the year and your budget for the year, and you should be thinking about how am I going to drive genetic merit on my animals. And that should be, in my opinion, embedded in your thinking, embedded in your plan, and reviewed annually. And we do speak to a number of our customers on an annual basis to do just that. How am I looking at my genetic improvement program, and how am I looking at genomic testing to drive that genetic merit and drive that economic output from testing?
I love that analogy. How do I get my widgets to make more profit? And it's really good, the compounding effect of all these different strategic parts of our business. If a dairy farmer's sitting on the fence going, I love what Daniel's saying, I really should look at this genomic stuff a bit deeper, or a farmer is already genetic testing or genomic testing and maybe thinking, gee, I should be getting more value out of what I'm doing. Where do they go to connect with Zoetis or connect with you to get more of this?
Sure. So there's a few different resources in terms of connecting with us. So our Clarified dedicated website, so www.clarified.com.au is a central resource that people can go to. We do have sales representatives all around the country. In Tassie, Phil Jarvie's the current representative in Tasmania, but we also have Jake Bourne, who's the Southern Australian genetics representative. The contact details are available on the Clarified website. In terms of wanting to take it to the next level and use your information, certainly training on SearchPoint is available. And again, we do that quite a bit. If you're yet to genomic test and you're somewhat hesitant, certainly speak to one of our staff members. But what I would highly recommend is that you look at your calf drop this particular year and you undertake testing of that calf drop. So you may say, look, you're not making a 10-year testing commitment by doing it, but by doing that first group of calves, you're going to get a very good understanding of where that group sits, not just within the national population, but where that group sits relative to where you want to go. Where is the overall profit merit of that group of animals? And even more importantly, what is the variation of the genetic merit of animals that exist within that herd or within that cohort of calves? Because that defines opportunity. Okay, and I've done this on hundreds of groups of animals, and the genetic merit and variation in merit really helps you define opportunity. And once you've got that data in front of you, you can certainly look at industry resources, and there's lots of industry resources either through Zoetis or DataGene or other partners that look at genetic merit and the impact of genetic merit and the importance of economics of genetic merit. But working at that strategy, we can certainly work with you and say, look, this is where we recommend this is how we recommend you use your data. These are the kind of decisions you could make with your information. And just to leverage back to the opening discussion about Zoetis and what we do and our space in the world, the advantage of also genomic testing is you can then invest in the best. So the test gives you the opportunity to find the best. Then once you've found in the best, the opportunity then is to put in place a sound best practice vaccination program to make sure that those animals have the best chance at defending themselves against disease and the best chance of actually performing. And the standards around best practice vaccination programs are well outlined in the new industry-wide initiative called Immune Ready, which Zoetis is one of the animal health partners, along with Dairy Australia and many other leading industry organisations, which outlines what is the best practice vaccination for cattle in order to help them drive performance. So once you've genomically tested, you can say, I've got the best cattle, now I can invest in the best in order to drive profit.
That's great. And that Immune Ready, I think hopefully we can get a podcast or something to that effect for another day, because that's another very valuable topic in itself. I've got a couple of thanks. So I guess one is Zoetis have been great supporters of the High Performance Herd project, and hopefully today's podcast just shows that really what we're trying to do is help dairy farmers overcome the overwhelm that's facing them currently. And this information is just, there's so much gold in here for them to help make decisions on farm. And thank you very much for your time, giving up some time today and sharing your wisdom with our listeners, sort of Australia, New Zealand, and a few around the world as well, actually. So yeah, thanks very much.
No worries at all, Andrew. Look, really appreciate the opportunity to talk, and yeah, I'm sure we'll touch base again soon.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the High Performance Herd podcast. Thanks to the sponsors, Fonterra, Idexx, Koru Diagnostics, TasHerd, the Tasmanian Dairy Trust, Zoetis, NHIA, Datamars. Feel free to subscribe and review the podcast. Share it with your friends. The more, the merrier. Jump on Facebook, search the High Performance Herd Project, and you're very welcome to join the High Performance Herd private Facebook group. If you want to see a video of this podcast, jump on YouTube or www.highperformanceherd.com, where you'll see a link to these sponsors for more information on the High Performance Herd Project, which is a real-life dairy farm, spring block calving right here in Tassie. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.